Hey, I'm Stephanie Brown. I'm a real estate broker, mom, wife, and a serial entrepreneur. Welcome to It's More of a Guideline, a podcast where we talk about navigating the world of entrepreneurship, relationships, health and fitness, and whatever else may come up. It's honest, raw, and authentic. I'm Stephanie Brown, a real estate broker, mom, wife, and serial entrepreneur. Find us wherever you listen to your podcast. All right. Hi, Morgan.
Hi, Stephanie.
Thanks for coming in today.
You're very welcome.
So before we started recording, you said you had been on over 100 podcasts, and this is the first one that you've done in person.
Yes.
That's wild.
It is wild.
Yeah.
I guess just it's awesome to be able to have the ability to talk from anywhere, but it's kind of cool to be actually in front of somebody.
Yeah.
So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like it's a little bit different to be face to face than
it
over
is different.
Zoom. I hate Zooms. I think, or any type of online thing like that. I think I got burnt out over COVID.
Yeah.
Everything that we were doing was
They
just
can get old.
Yeah.
We're just not meant to look at our faces while we're talking to other people.
Yeah.
So this is like a more natural social interaction.
Yeah, right.
So,
I know. And when you start, I don't know, do you do Marco Polo? Do you know what that is?
The app?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do Marco Polo and a lot, for work, and then stay connected with friends. And I just feel like I just criticize my face the whole time instead of of paying attention to what I'm supposed to be saying. But anyway, so can you say a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into it. So I have a lot of questions.
Well, I'm Morgan Adams. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I am a sleep coach for adults.
That's amazing.
I've been a sleep coach for 4 years. Wow. And I absolutely love it. It was really kind of fueled by my own experience with having insomnia for about 8 years and being dependent on sleeping meds for that.
Yeah. So you told me that when we discussed pre-interview. And so can you kind of get into that a little bit? How that started? And
sure.
It was Ambien.
It was
right?
Ambien.
Okay.
Yeah. So this happened about 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was in a new relationship with a guy. And there were some stressful things happening, which I won't go into. But what happened was I just had a really hard time falling asleep during this kind of tumult in my personal life.
Okay.
And I would lie in bed for 1 to 2 hours most nights, looking at the clock, tossing and turning.
Yeah.
And after a few months of this nonsense, I decided I'm going to go see my doctor.
Mm-hmm. And this was even before iPhones and Blackberries and stuff, right?
Well, this was maybe around the time that was coming out. I think you could probably call someone on a cell phone, but you couldn't scroll Facebook.
You weren't, right. You weren't doom scrolling at night.
None of this was predicated by the things that often hurt people's sleep now. It's the blue light. But so this was pre all of that.
Okay.
But I went to the doctor. I was given Ambien as a prescription sleep aid. And during that time of my life, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep.
Okay.
So the concept of taking a drug was a very normal type of thing for me. So I didn't think anything of it. And the Ambien did help me get to sleep a little faster, but I paid on the back end the next day. I had a lot of grogginess, a lot of brain fog, difficulty concentrating. And at this point in my life, I had moved out of the pharmaceutical sales world and was working in public health in sort of a PR role, having to do communications. And I had to produce a copy for press releases, for example, very quickly. It was they would hand me something to say, write it now. Mm-hmm. And I was so foggy and brain dead in the morning that I just couldn't produce the work quickly enough. And I did get reprimanded a few times for my lack of speed in that regard. But I just kept doing, the pills because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't take them.
Right.
Scared of not being able to fall asleep again.
Did you have anxiety around that?
To some extent, I did. Yeah. But it was sort of I just kind of accepted that as my normal. I accepted the fact, it was almost like being hungover every morning without drinking alcohol, just groggy, slow, And unfortunately, I did mix alcohol with that several times.
Right.
And that was a freaking disaster.
Yeah,
by the way.
I bet.
That
Yeah.
was like adding fuel to the fire. But then at some point, about, I guess, 8 years into this, I met a guy who is my husband now. And in the beginning of that relationship, he said, you know, when you take that Ambien, you kind of become like a zombie, and it kind of freaks me out.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, he is right. Like, this is probably not good.
Yeah.
So I decided that my relationship with Ambien was going to be severed. And what I did was I just kind of started to taper my pills down. And that is the appropriate way to take yourself off of medication, but you really need to be under the guidance of the prescribing provider.
That's what I was going to ask you. Were you at that time?
I was not.
Okay.
I went rogue.
Yeah. You got this.
I went rogue, and I was like, I'm smart enough to figure this
Right.
out. So, you know, for anyone listening who is like on a sleep med, a psychiatric med, or like any med, is like really don't go through this alone. Like, ask for help in saying, I want to get off this med. Give me the directions and the guidance on how to do this.
Do you think physicians are open to that conversation, or do they?
I think they are.
Okay.
I think so. My take on physicians and the sleeping pills is this: physicians, primary care physicians, let me specify, the general family doctors, they are typically getting about 2 hours of sleep science in med school.
Right.
Which is mind-boggling, considering we're spending about a third of our lives asleep.
Right.
And so when somebody like me, for example, comes to the primary care doctor and has insomnia, the doctor, now I'm generalizing, there are definitely exceptions, but it's really typical for a doctor to be like, okay, well, let's start you on a sleeping med, or give you a list of sleep hygiene tips that you've already gone through yourself and they didn't work. So I think that they're well-meaning, you know, in their approach, but they don't really know how to best work with somebody who has insomnia.
They're working with what's within their toolbox, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great
like
way.
so many other
Yeah. That's
things.
their toolbox. And I'm not saying that sleeping pills should be banned or they're wrong to take, but they're really only meant to be used for like 4 weeks. So that's according to the directions on most of the medications. They're meant to be short term. And the unfortunate thing is that quite often, and I've worked with clients, who have been on sleeping pills 10, 15, 20 years.
Are they physically addictive or psychologically?
They're more of they can be to a certain extent physically addictive, but I would say the most addictive quality is a psychological dependence on them, for sure. And the doctors, what they really need to be doing is giving the patient, like, okay, here's 2 weeks of this Ambien, and let's talk about an exit strategy after that. So they need to be kind of given the tools and the direction on how to get off of the pills.
Right.
What's happening quite often is like a doctor will write a refill after refill after refill. That's becoming less common now. In my 4 years of doing this, I'm finding that primary care doctors are becoming more awake.
Does the patient have to come back in to get that refill?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. It depends on the doctor. I think doctors are getting more strict about prescribing long term, and sometimes prescribing at all. I've had clients tell me, "Oh, my doctor is not going to give me Ambien." So I think slowly the word is starting to get out about sleeping pills among the medical community, and there's like a recent study that came out a few months ago that showed when people are taking an Ambien type of drug, what's called a hypnotic sedative, a sedative hypnotic, I got it backwards. What's happening in their brain is there's a lymphatic system, and that's like the lymphatic system for your brain. So imagine your brain in deep sleep. It's almost like wringing out the toxins. So when you're taking an Ambien type of medication, that lymphatic clearance gets reduced by like 30%.
Oh, wow.
So in other words, those toxins aren't being appropriately disposed of while you're sleeping. And because of that, people are starting to think about, is cognitive decline more apt to happen?
Like the brain fog that you
yeah,
were.
Or actually like even more than brain fog.
Like dementia?
Like in that way,
Okay.
yeah, sort of like, this is not to scare anybody because there's no like study proving this. It's more of a causative, kind of a correlational type of research that's coming out. So people are starting to become more like, they're becoming more like opposed to the sleeping medications because of this type of research coming out.
Yeah.
And just the possible risk of cognitive decline as we get older. So that's kind of where I see things now with like primary care medicine and their view on sleeping pills.
It does seem like people are starting to become aware of the benefits of sleep.
I think so.
Yeah. And what are some of those benefits?
Yeah. Well, it affects you. Sleep affects you on every single area of your life. So it affects your body in terms of like, I mentioned your brain health because of those clearing of the toxins. It affects your metabolism, your hormone balance. It affects your ability to fight infection, your ability to build muscle strength, your ability to be empathetic and kind.
Yeah.
And that's something that's not talked about as often. But really, it touches on every single area of our lives. And so when sleep, like there's sort of a saying, when sleep goes, everything goes. And in our world, we look at the pillars of health, sleep, nutrition, and movement. And quite often, the movement and the nutrition piece get top billing. I mean, you can find so much information and so many professionals helping with nutrition and training. But I would argue that of all those three pillars, sleep is the most important pillar upon which the others really kind of stand. Because if you're not getting adequate quality sleep, you're more likely to give into cravings.
Right.
And because of your hunger hormones being all out of whack, you're more likely to reach for that piece of cake after a bad night of sleep than you would be like, a high protein, healthy lunch. And if you haven't gotten enough sleep, you're not going to have the motivation and the strength to do your workouts.
Right. So you might skip workouts or
so quite often
through
when
motions.
I do a lot of collaboration with trainers and people in the health space, and they're like telling their clients all the time, if they're not meeting their fitness goals, they are asking them about their sleep. If they're not meeting their nutrition goals, they're also asking about their sleep. So there's a lot of collaborative opportunities, between me and these other professionals, because sometimes the nutritionists and the trainers don't have that real deep understanding of sleep and how to improve it. So there's a lot of room for collaboration, for sure.
Now, what is specifically happening with women in perimenopause? Menopause?
Yeah, it's really tough in the realm of sleep. So statistics show that about half of women in midlife are struggling with their sleep, it's quite a lot of us.
Yeah.
And there's really kind of like three main reasons why. So the first one is hormones. Our progesterone and our estrogen are fluctuating and then they're declining. And so we're feeling the effects of that. And then also, as women in midlife, we're more prone to things like depression and anxiety. And both of those conditions actually leave you more vulnerable to insomnia. And then the third reason is really more of like a socio-cultural reason, and that's like competing demands with family and work. So a 45-year-old woman or 50-year-old woman in that age range, she may have kids at home who she's responsible for. She also may have older parents who may need help getting to and from appointments. So you've got each generation of the family who needs her.
Right.
And then on top of that, she might be in a managerial position at work, or she might be running her own business. Like she's essentially like at the top of her career game. So with all of those competing demands, there's more stress and anxiety, which does impact your ability to have good sleep. So there's just so many different layers to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, women are getting hit really hard in the midlife transition.
Yeah. Why do you think women are so reluctant during perimenopause, especially to do like hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, well, I think from where I sit, a lot of people are reluctant to do hormone therapy because there has been a lot of misinformation. There was a huge study back in the early 2000s called the Women's Health Initiative, and that basically was thousands of women, and they've sort of retracted the results of it now, but basically what happened at that point in the early 2000s was women were scared of getting breast cancer from the estrogen. And what ended up happening is like an entire generation of physicians got spooked by hormone replacement therapy. And so
By that study.
yeah, that study. Now, the study has been debunked, and there's even books about it. There's a wonderful book called Estrogen Matters that really unwinds that whole argument about estrogen. But I think that we need more people talking about it and getting the correct education on hormones. Now, I'm a big fan of hormone replacement therapy, but from where I sit, it's not the panacea for sleep. I mean, I have worked with clients, several of them who are on hormone replacement therapy, and it doesn't really move the needle on their sleep. So I don't want anyone to think that it's like
that's the end all be all. We're going to do that.
Definitely not. I mean, I think it's a great option, but it's not the entire thing.
What are your thoughts on now with so many medications being prescribed for adults for things like ADHD, and then how that affects sleep at night, and then the cycle of like that type of medication during the day, and then a sleeping pill in the evening? I mean, are you seeing that is one thing that's affecting people's sleep?
Well, I'm not just terribly familiar with ADHD medications, but I would imagine that if they were kind of like uppers, they could potentially impact people's sleep. I think that people need to really, if they're on any medication, really, even vitamins, like vitamin B can be activating. So I always tell people to take vitamin B in the morning because it's an activating vitamin. So I think that if you are on a medication and you're having trouble sleeping, you should talk to your doctor about like the appropriate timing for that dose, because it could, I mean, I've definitely seen it happen that people are taking the right medication at the wrong time.
Yeah, I actually like magnesium keeps me awake.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've actually heard of some people having paradoxical effects, and they take their magnesium during the day for that reason.
Yeah, I don't take I can't take it in the afternoon. Or later. It's
Interesting.
So
I don't know what percentage of people have that, but there's definitely people out there who have that type of reaction.
Yeah.
So again, and so many people take magnesium.
I know, and I found that out trying to take it in the evening, trying to sleep better.
So really did you really pinpoint that as like the thing that you started taking it and you're like, now I'm not sleeping? Yep. What brand was it? Just out of curiosity.
The Calm, like the powder.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's, I think, mainly magnesium citrate. Yeah, there's like many different forms of magnesium. That's
because
probably...
I get it, and I've done it in IVs too, and not had that issue, but
Interesting.
It's weird.
Yeah, magnesium glycinate and threonate are probably the heaviest hitter magnesiums for sleep. The citrate is used sometimes, but I don't think it's as potent. But you have to be kind of careful with magnesium because it can create loose stool.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I'm trying to. It might be citrate. It might be magnesium citrate is the one that causes more loose stools. I'd have to fact check myself. But yeah, sometimes when people start magnesium and they start it too high, they will get loose stools.
That's always fun too, to be up at night and then have that as well. Good times. What are your thoughts on the Oura Ring, the Whoop, all of those things that kind of read your sleep at night?
Yeah. Well, I actually have the Oura and the Whoop.
Okay.
And a couple more sleep trackers that I use all at the same time. And I think they're really awesome tools for many reasons, but there's downsides. So I think that the people who benefit from them the most are people who are on like a sleep optimization journey. They're really wanting to improve their sleep. Okay. And they're also people who can look at the data that they get on their dashboard and make behavioral changes based on that data. So for example, I'll even use myself for this. having alcohol at night.
Yeah. Will put you in the red.
That will put you in the red.
Yeah.
You'll notice a decline in your sleep metrics, probably your recovery metrics. And then if you see that and you make the change of, okay, I'm going to have less alcohol, or I'm going to have my alcohol earlier in the night, then that's a really great use case for a sleep tracker, because you've taken the data and you've made a behavioral change upon it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you had a sleep tracker and had that data and never made any behavioral change, well, you've kind of wasted your point.
Right.
Yeah, what is the point?
Yeah.
Now, where I think sleep trackers get a little bit kind of into an area that's not great is when you have insomnia. And that's the people who have insomnia, those are the people that I'm mainly working with. And they tend to have a lot of anxiety about their sleep.
Right.
So when they look at their data in the morning, what often happens is they become even more anxious about their sleep because their numbers look off. Mm-hmm. And I usually recommend that my clients not use a tracker while we're working together, because what I really want them to do is rely on their internal cues about how their sleep is. So in other words, instead of relying on the sleep tracker to tell you how you slept, you tune into your body and you assess like how you slept based on how you're feeling.
Right.
Because that's ultimately the most important marker of how you're sleeping. Mm-hmm. And they've also done studies, this is so interesting, where they've tracked people, where they've had people wear a sleep tracker, and they wouldn't let the person look at their data. Like, let's say the person slept really well, mm-hmm. and the researcher said, your data looks bad. That person almost lives their day as if they had bad sleep.
That's, I think, what would happen to me if I wore one. And I think I would do that.
And I think that's really important to know mm-hmm. about yourself, is you have to understand how your mind works. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case with you, maybe you wouldn't be a great candidate. There's something that I call the middle ground approach. And this is where you wear your tracker every night, but you don't look at the data but once a week.
Okay.
And so you sit down Saturday or Sunday morning and you look at your dashboard and you look at your data and you kind of notice trends. Because what you are looking for really is trends over time.
Right.
You're not
a little snapshot, right? You're trying to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So for the people who are getting a little bit too emotional about their score, I would recommend that approach. It's just putting it. Maybe give one of two things: either that middle ground approach, looking at it once a week, or giving yourself a little vacation from your tracker for a week or two without it.
So let's say someone comes to you as a sleep coach, and what qualifies someone to come to you, first of all?
Good question.
And then what does that process look like?
So the people that I really work with best are people who have insomnia. Mm-hmm. Or
what is the definition of insomnia? Because some people are like, I have insomnia, but do you?
Yeah, the word is loosely used. So there's a clinical definition of insomnia, mm-hmm. and that's when you're having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up too early at least 3 nights a week.
Okay.
And you also have to have the criteria of being unsatisfied with your sleep and or having daytime consequences, like negative daytime consequences because of the poor sleep.
Okay.
Now, for it to be acute insomnia, it would be less than 3 months. For it to be chronic insomnia, it would be more than 3 months. So like, as you can see, there's some degree of subjectivity there mm-hmm. about it. Mm-hmm. There's certainly people out there all over the place who are having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up too early many nights a week, but they have no consequences and it doesn't bother them whatsoever. Those are the people I would never see.
Right.
Because mm-hmm. they wouldn't even be seeking me out. Mm-hmm. It's a non-issue for them.
Right.
So mainly the people who come to me are those people who fall into that criteria. There's often quite a bit of anxiety that comes along with mm-hmm. People who have insomnia, and it often goes back to fears about their health. So quite often you'll hear this 8-hour myth, I call it. You need 8 hours of sleep. You probably hear that on repeat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people get very nervous because they're not hitting 8 hours, and not everyone needs 8 hours.
Right.
So the National Sleep Foundation recommends between 7 and 9 hours for mm-hmm. healthy adults. But in the fine print of their recommendations, it says anywhere between 6 to 10 hours could be appropriate. So people need to consider that as part of, looking at their amount of sleep. And just not everyone needs the same amount of sleep. But what's even more important than the quantity of sleep is the consistency. There was a huge study about a year ago, thousands of people, where they showed that people who had very high rates of sleep consistency, that means going to bed and waking up at the same time, they had a lower all-cause mortality rate than people who slept 8 hours at a very irregular schedule.
Okay. Huh.
So that really kind of put the load off of people who were like stressing out because they weren't getting 8 hours. And maybe it's because they really didn't have time in their day for 8 hours. And they were basically getting 6, but they were getting, maybe they're getting 6 hours a night and they're very regular about it. And that probably makes them feel a little bit better about their sleep because of that study.
Right.
So when I'm working with people, we are kind of like going over those myths about sleep. And most of the clients that I work with are actually ending up quite content with less than 8 hours.
So you're starting with some education.
Yeah, there's a lot of education to it. So the way that I've kind of developed my own little, I call it the trifecta. And it's 3 things. This is for most people that I work with. It's CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia.
Okay.
And that's really the gold standard treatment for insomnia above sleeping pills. It was developed in the 1980s. And what that is, it's a series of techniques that help you change your behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs about sleep.
Okay.
And then the second thing is circadian rhythm optimization practices. And then the third thing is mindfulness. So each client really kind of gets educated about all of those and learns practices on all of those to help their sleep. So yes, it's mainly people who have insomnia. Occasionally it's people who want to optimize their sleep. Like I've had a few clients who, already slept pretty well, like they were midlife women, they were, 40, 50, and they were just like, my sleep's starting to kind of like decline and I really want to get ahead of it. And they're the kinds of people who come to me with the trackers.
Right.
And
they're already
they're already doing pretty well.
Right.
But they're optimizers. They want to be better than they are.
Right.
So those are the people I work with. And before I work with people, I do a pretty thorough screening and an interview with them, I call it a consultation call. Basically, I want to make sure that it's a good fit in terms of they've got the issues that I'm capable of dealing with, because I'm not a sleep doctor, and I try to be very clear about that. Like I don't work with people who have some of the other sleep disorders like sleep apnea and restless leg syndrome. I have a screening process where I can refer people who have those issues to other providers. Because I really want to stay in my lane.
Yeah, stay in your lane, right? Yeah. What are some things that we're doing to sabotage our sleep? Even not even people who have insomnia, but just
Well, I would say probably in the inconsistency piece, I think is pretty important. I think there are a lot of people out there, and I was doing this too. So I'm not perfect by any means, but when I was in my 30s, I was getting up at like 6 a.m. every weekday for work, and then I would sleep in till like 9 on the weekend. And so what ends up happening when you do that is you get something called social jet lag, which is basically like jet lag, but you're not going anywhere.
Oh, wow.
And so what ends up happening to a lot of people who do this is they have a hard time falling asleep on Sunday. And then Mondays are really hard. They
have to get out of bed early because they're starting the schedule over.
And my theory about why people hate Mondays is because most people have social jet lag and they don't realize it.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like Mondays could be better for most people if they really kind of observe that consistency piece. And so what that really looks like is going to bed and waking up plus or minus 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So keeping that window within 30 minutes. So go to bed between 9 and 9:30 and get up between 6:30, 6 and 6:30, keeping that window tight versus having these just real varying wake up and going to bed times. So I think that
routine.
The routine. So along the same lines of routines, also having meals around the same time each day, because we have a master circadian clock, call it our suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it's attached to all of these tiny little circadian clocks in every cell or organ. So we've got these little circadian clocks in our gut. And when we eat at the same time, our gut's expecting to produce those enzymes to break down that food. So I'm recommending people to eat their meals within about an hour. So for example, breakfast between 7 and 8, lunch between 12 and 1, dinner between 5 and 6. Those are just some examples.
Sure.
Versus I run into a lot of women who will skip breakfast a lot, and then they get busy at work, and then they don't eat lunch till 3, and then maybe they don't eat dinner till 9.
They're running around. They're just kids practices and everything.
And I get it. Like we're all leading really busy lifestyles, but it just takes like some pre-planning, and maybe some meal prep. So those are some things that people are doing. I think also the devices can be really problematic, and it's honestly not just the blue light and the bright light. People like to point the finger at the blue light, and the blue light's not great for our metabolism or our sleep. But I'm not the kind of person who's like, you've got to have no screens an hour before bed, because what I believe is that we have to be really cognizant of the content of our screens. So, for example, and people are very shocked when I say this, my wind down routine is I watch TV for 30 to 60 minutes before bed. The caveat is I'm wearing blue blocking glasses. So those are orange, and they basically block the blue light from the TV. I'm also watching on a regular TV, that's about the same, farther distance away that you and I are, so a pretty far distance. And I'm also choosing content that's not stimulating.
No murder mysteries.
No murder mysteries.
Right before bed. Okay.
No mainstream news. I'm doing, Great British Baking Show.
Right.
Travel documentaries, food shows, things that are light.
Yeah.
I think that if you're on a screen, you have to consider all those elements too. So just saying blanket statement, shut down your screen, there's more nuance to it than that, right? So I don't like the message of just, everyone's got to turn off their device, half an hour before bed. Now, you do need to be careful with your phone, and looking at social media is very, activating for your brain. But it kind of makes me laugh when people are like, oh, yeah, I'll just put on my blue blockers and just scroll Instagram or TikTok. And I'm like, you're missing part of the point here.
Right, the content.
Yeah, the content is meant to stimulate you.
What are your thoughts on having your phone in the same room with you when you sleep? Any thoughts on that?
Not a fan. They're for a couple reasons. Number one, it can be really tempting to grab your phone if you wake up. A lot of people do that if they can't sleep.
And then you're in a spiral of staying awake, right?
Then you're in a spiral. And then the other thing is there's EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies that come off of your phone. And there's not a super high amount of data on this, but
we'll see, right?
There's more data. I mean, I feel like it's good to operate out of abundance of caution with these devices and the EMFs. So you don't, my personal, philosophy is try not to have any electronics within 8 feet of your head at night. So unplugging all the things that you're able to unplug around you to prevent the EMFs in your space. Because while you're sleeping, that's your healing time. And when you're being exposed to EMFs, you're really kind of impairing that healing process from happening.
Yeah.
So, and people push back on me a lot, and, I don't ever force anyone to do anything, but these are just things that I recommend for the people who are just like, look, I'm not going to have my phone away from me because, I've got kids, I've got
emergencies
So how we kind of work around that is, they have a filter where only a certain number gets through.
Yeah, I've heard of people doing that too.
There's kind of little tricks that you can do, and there's EMF types of equipment you can buy.
Oh,
and
wow.
things like I have a little, I should have brought it with me, it's like a little shield that kind of, it doesn't prevent the EMFs from coming in, but it helps mitigate the effects on your body.
Okay.
And there are several of those types of products around that you can just put in your bedroom.
Yeah.
If you really feel like you must have your phone there.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on meditation apps and things like that to fall asleep to? Any?
I'm generally a fan of meditation apps because they do have a lot of variety, and I think they're pretty accessible and they're free. I guess, the only downside is that you could become dependent on using it.
Right.
Like, for example, if let's just say you forgot your phone somewhere, you're traveling and you can't pick up the Wi-Fi, or something's happening where you can't access it, you don't want to really be in a position where you're like, okay, now I can't sleep.
I can't sleep. Yeah. Do you have the same thoughts around like sound machines and fans and all of those things?
To some extent, but I mean, I use these things. Like I use it's called the Deep Sleep Track by this it's some kind of like it's a neuroacoustic company called Newcom.
Okay.
And they have very specifically designed tracks around sleep to like mimic the waves. So I use that, and it's awesome. I think white noise and pink noise and brown noise, those can be helpful. I always forget the frequencies between each, so I can't really speak to
I know.
Which one is better.
I've been seeing that a lot lately,
But
all these different.
I think the main gist is you want to have, if you're going to have noise on at night, you want to make sure it's continuous, that it doesn't this is where it gets to be a problem with music, because music will stop and start. And those like changes in the music can cause you to have a micro awakening.
Yeah.
And that can, even though you're not really awake, it can just kind of just disturb your whole sleep pattern.
Right. Or like having the TV on in the background.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that, but I know some people just like you kind of just sometimes have to pick your battles,
right?
Like, and just
Yeah.
kind of do what works for you. I don't think there's like any huge harm in having I think the biggest harm with the TV on in the background is the light, the ambient light. So if like I have clients who are like, I really want the TV on, so we compromise by having them wear an eye mask so that they're not exposed to any kind of light.
Yeah. Do you recommend that people do like blackout curtains? And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So your room should be very, very dark. It should be so dark you can't really see your hand in front of it when you put your hand out.
Man, I love that.
So a couple ways to get that blackness. So there's blackout curtains, shades. There's a brand that I use called U Blockout. U, the letter, and then blackout.
Okay.
And it is seriously blacked out. You order them, and then they arrive. You put them up yourself, and they actually, honestly, block out more than like custom made ones that I got when I moved in my house.
Yeah.
So those are really good. Those can be a little pricey for some people. So if people are not at a point where they want to invest in putting something on their window, an eye mask can really just do the trick.
Okay.
Because the eye masks are very inexpensive.
Right.
And I travel with one. I have one in my suitcase at all times, because if you're traveling, you can't always know.
Yeah, you don't know.
Especially with
Right.
an Airbnb, because they're not really. Hotels are getting better at making rooms sleep friendly, but an Airbnb is just, usually your average Joe or Jane in their house, and they're not really thinking about the light coming in from the window and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Recently on your social media, you were talking about a specific blanket.
Oh, blanket.
Or maybe you were talking about weighted blankets or...
So I have a few blankets.
Okay.
So...
no, this was a specific... I don't think it was weighted.
Was it a cooling blanket?
Yeah, cooling blanket. Yeah.
So, I have all sorts of things on my bed. As you can imagine, I'm pretty tricked out with my bed.
I bet. Oh my gosh.
So I think what I talk most about is the cooling mattress pad.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
That is amazing. It's by a brand called 8 Sleep.
8 Sleep.
And it's basically like a fitted sheet for your bed. It's sort of like thicker than a fitted sheet, but it's essentially that shape. And there's actually water running through that sheet, there's sort of like kind of a tube, and attached to the tube is a basin of water.
Okay.
So it's like that's the base. It looks like a computer monitor essentially, okay. And you can control the temperature of the mattress to make it cooler or warmer. And if you have a partner, each person has their separate controls, so there's no more temperature wars. Mm-hmm. And I have found that to be really, really helpful for my own sleep, just as I'm, in midlife now.
Yeah. Should we be sleeping in cooler temperatures?
We should be. Okay. Yeah. So if you think about back, like our ancestors, mm-hmm. they were sleeping on the ground. This mm-hmm. is a theory so they were sleeping on the ground, mm-hmm. and the ground is cooler than other areas.
Yeah.
So we've kind of adapted as humans to be more, to sleep better when our surface is cool. Mm-hmm. So many mattresses right now trap heat. And it's like whenever I love my little 8 Sleep mattress pad for cooling. But gosh, when I travel, I'm so upset that I don't have it.
Right? Yeah.
Because mattresses that are like just conventional, like kind of like memory foam, mm-hmm. they are like little ovens. They just trap that heat. And if you're a hot sleeper, mm-hmm. and so many women in midlife, even men, there are a lot of men who sleep hot too.
Right.
I've met many who want the cooling of the mattress pad.
Yeah. What does something like that cost?
It varies. Yeah, it varies. Generally, it's a couple thousand.
Okay.
For like the 8 Sleep they just brought one that's like an addition, like a top of the line one that's pretty expensive, but I don't think you need all the bells and whistles. Like mm-hmm. each generation has new things added, but I have the basic one. It's probably about $2,000-ish, okay. depending on your bed size. We have a California King, so that's nice. Going to be more expensive than another size. But to me, it's been worth the investment just because of the quality of sleep that we're getting.
Right. What is the investment for someone who's looking for a sleep coach, and how long is your journey with someone?
Yeah. So, it depends on who you're working with. Mm-hmm. I tend to be kind of like, I guess I would call myself kind of like a middle price type of sleep coach.
Okay.
But there are not that many out there.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of different packages mm-hmm. that people can choose from depending on really how severe their issue is. Someone who's on sleeping pills and wants to come off the sleeping pills, they would generally take more sessions to work with me mm-hmm. because we want to go slow.
Yeah.
With tapering off of those meds. And just as an aside, I always like to say that since I'm not a doctor, we always work with the client's doctor mm-hmm. on developing a taper schedule, because it's not up to me. I'm not the provider, the prescriber.
Yeah.
So we all agree on the taper schedule, and then I'm there to support the client and help them develop the skills using the CBTI technique, the circadian rhythm, the mindfulness. So I come in and help them develop those skills so they feel more confident about their sleep. And so when they've got that confidence, then they're able to really back off on taking the meds. Mm-hmm. So we want to take it slow, though.
Yeah. There's no insurance coverage for that at this time, right?
No, I don't really work with insurance. Mm-hmm. And I think most sleep coaches, unless you're in an academic center, probably don't.
Right. Uh-huh.
So it is, I think I've had a couple of clients, I've made like an invoice for them and they submit it to their HSA. So there's little workarounds for people who want to get creative. But
that makes sense.
I don't deal with the insurance companies.
Right, I know. I don't blame you. It's a pain anyway. All right, let me check my notes, make sure I got to everything. Let's see. And what does cause the middle of the night wake ups?
Oh gosh.
And then what can you do about them?
This is a juicy topic. So before I share, there is a resource on my website.
Okay.
It's a free guide called Awake Again at 3 a.m. Your guide to why you're waking up and what to do about it.
I saw that on your website.
So I developed that free guide because quite literally the wake ups are the biggest problem my clients have. Mm. And so I'll just give a few little kind of like teasers from that. Hopefully people will go get it because it gives the whole story. But I just want to preface that wake ups don't mean inherently there's something wrong with your sleep. we are actually designed to have brief wake ups throughout the night.
Okay.
So if you think back again on our ancestors, they were sleeping in the wild. They didn't have nice homes with security systems like we might have. And so they woke up pretty much after they've completed a sleep cycle. And we have like 5 or 6, 7 a night.
Okay.
So we're designed to have a brief awakening after a sleep cycle, scan our surroundings for safety, and then go back to sleep. So totally normal. If you're awake for more than or less than 2 or 3 minutes, you're not going to remember the awakenings. The problem happens when people have the awakening and they start to worry about it, right? So when people this is where it gets a little sticky. What I'll say about the worry and the catastrophizing is that when you are awake in the middle of the night, your brain is not operating in the way that it would at 9 a.m. So your prefrontal cortex, your logical, rational brain is, quote, offline, and your amygdala, your fight or flight, your irrational brain is more in control.
That makes a lot of sense.
So if you've ever noticed, if you've woken up at 2 or 3 in the morning, the thoughts you have tend to be a little bit more dramatic.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some crazy thoughts when I've woken up, at that, like I've thought the world was going to end.
Right.
And then what happens is you wake up and you eat your breakfast and you drink your coffee and you reflect on what you thought and how devastating it seemed at the moment.
Right.
They've even done these studies called Mind After Midnight, where they basically tracked somebody's emotional state over a 24-hour clock. And they found that the lowest emotional state was at 3 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
So we're wired. This is our wiring. So I think just knowing that right there can help maybe diffuse you or help you get yourself off the ledge the next time you have like a catastrophic thought.
Yeah. And it's very lonely to wake up in the middle of the night.
Lonely.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, not to get grim, but I mean, that's really the time when most suicides happen.
Wow.
It's because of that. You feel alone.
You don't feel that alone. It's like you're awake all day. You don't feel alone like that.
Yeah.
But at night.
Exactly. But just a few reasons why people are waking up other than the natural scans for safety. What I'm seeing most in my client population, which is mainly women in midlife, are people being too hot.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily mean they're having night sweats or hot flashes, but they're just being overheated. And so, again, those tools of like the cooling mattress pad, again, that's a little bit more of an investment. But things like just turning the AC down or like having your room temperature about 65, 68 would be a good range. Sleeping in breathable fabrics. I really like bamboo pajamas.
Okay.
Those are nice and cooling. Not having a huge thick comforter. A lot of times people just get way overheated by that comforter. So having more like thinner cotton blankets that you can rip on and off that won't just like make you so hot from like a comforter does. Another reason is blood sugar dips around 3 a.m. Those cause a cortisol spike, which wakes you up. So a couple fixes for that are having a really light snack about an hour before bed.
Okay.
Maybe like Greek yogurt with some almonds on it. We're talking like a healthy snack.
Right.
With protein and fat. We're not talking cookies and ice
Pizza,
cream.
yeah.
No, those will just make your sleep worse.
Yeah.
And so that would be sort of a Band-Aid fix for the wake-ups that can happen from a blood sugar crash. If that is your issue, you want to work with somebody on making sure that your blood sugar is balanced all day long. Like you might want to get a continuous glucose monitor that sticks on your arm because a lot of clients will find when they wear one of those.
It's not just happening at night?
It's happening during the day, but then they can actually track the wake up back to that dip in the monitor. And then they know that's what's waking them up. So then you kind of need to develop a protocol to help your metabolism so that you are like having just not as many dips at any point. And
right.
That takes a little work.
Right.
You know? And then the last reason, I mean, there are more reasons in the guide, but the last reason I'll share is sleep breathing issues.
Okay.
So as we get older, and for women especially, we are having more instances of sleep breathing disorders like sleep apnea or upper airway resistance syndrome, those usually happen because of a decline in our female hormones. Those hormones typically protect our airway. So without those hormones, we're going to potentially have more sleep breathing issues. And I will say that women typically don't present in the same way that maybe their male partner would present if they had sleep apnea. Men tend to be more snorers.
Right.
Whereas women, I mean, yes, some do snore, but typically their breathing is a lot more subtle in terms of the pausing and the interrupting. It's a lot harder to detect for like maybe a partner. So if somebody has a sleep tracker and you notice like a lot of little white ticks throughout the night, like several, that to me, that would be a sign that you should probably get your sleep breathing checked because you could have these little micro awakenings.
Okay.
So I have, unfortunately worked with a lot of women who during the course of the coaching, as I begin to suspect they do have apnea, they get tested, and lo and behold, they have mild apnea.
Right.
And so what ends up happening is, we work on finding a provider for them, a way to treat it. That's usually an oral appliance for a mild case of apnea. Sometimes you need a CPAP. If you've got more mild or more moderate apnea, you would do a CPAP. And the CPAPs that are out right now are a lot more user-friendly. I mean, they're not like a Darth Vader mask.
Yeah.
They're like much lighter, like less cumbersome to wear. So yeah, the middle of the night wake-ups, those are some kind of like little kind of reasons, but they're like
and going to the bathroom too. Like I feel like as women, as we get older, it's like how many times can you get up and go to the bathroom at night? It's like a sport.
I know. So yeah, the going to the bathroom is a natural thing that starts to happen more often as we get older. 1 to 2 bathroom trips a night, not a big deal. When you're getting into like 3 or more, that's when we begin to sort of suspect possible sleep apnea. That might be a sign of sleep apnea. Sometimes it's interesting because people will wake up because they think they have to go to the bathroom, but they actually woke up for some other reason.
And they'll get up and go to the bathroom because they're up and then
might as well,
right?
Because I'm probably going to have to go soon. But like, I think a lot of the reasons people wake up are from being overheated, the blood sugar issues, the sleep breathing, and then I'm up, I might as well go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But I think for most people, it's a good idea to have some kind of curfew on your liquids. I think that's helpful. I think a lot of people have...
And caffeine and alcohol.
Yeah, caffeine, alcohol. Like, I mean, we all want to stay hydrated, and sometimes what people will do is they'll have kind of a target number of ounces of water they want to drink.
I've been guilty of this.
And then I think we all have. And then we like start chugging the water, like, at 6 or 7 at night to try to like make up for what we didn't drink during the day. So if you can think about like front loading your water and getting most of your hydration in the first part of the day, that's probably a good idea so that you can kind of taper yourself off. And then also like watching some of the foods you eat at night. I know that if I have a lot of tomatoes, like sometimes we'll make like a tomato and feta salad or whatever, and I'll eat a lot of that stuff because it's just so good. I will inevitably have to go to the bathroom. And I looked it up and it said that tomatoes can irritate your bladder lining. I'm like, there we go. So, I mean, I would have never really, I had to look that up because I didn't know. But like, I was just like, I'm noticing a trend here.
Right.
Tomatoes and bathroom breaks.
So
random.
Very interesting. Well, we are coming up on time, but why don't you say how people can get in touch with you, where they can find you on your social media, website, all of that stuff.
Thank you for the opportunity. So my website is morganadamswellness.com.
Okay.
You can find there the guide that I mentioned about 3 a.m. wake-ups. You can find the opportunity to book a consult with me if you feel like you might need some help with your sleep. If I'm not the right fit, I will gladly refer you to somebody who's more appropriate. I'm also on Instagram at morganadams.wellness. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on social media. So like,
they can people
you can DM me. Like, I love to talk about sleep. So like, don't be shy. Just like reach out and say hi. Cause I love hearing from people who've heard these interviews and like what's helping them and what their struggles are. I'm kind of sleep obsessed if you haven't picked that up already. So I love to talk about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for coming in today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course.